Hi again YouTube, it's that one guy in lit class, and today we're going to talk about sophists. Specifically, we're going to talk about one sophist, this guy right here, whose name can be pronounced Gorgias or Gorgias, and guess which one I'm going to use. So, brief history lesson, sophists were ancient teachers who wandered around Greece and later Rome, and taught various subjects in exchange for money. Many of them focused on what we think of now as political skills, ethics, rhetoric, culture, and so on, but the Greek word sophos simply means skilled or wise. Gorgias was a sophist particularly interested in rhetoric, and part of his teaching style was to give speeches that would demonstrate the virtue of rhetoric and also drum up new clients. One of his most famous surviving works is called the Encomium of Helen, in which he defends Helen of Troy against those who blame her for starting the Trojan War. The Encomium is pretty short, but we're not going to go into too much detail with it, though I will include a link in the description if you'd like to read it for yourself. What we're going to take out of it, though, is an argument that Gorgias makes about the nature of language. As part of his defense, Gorgias argues that Helen may have been persuaded by Paris to leave her husband, and that if this were the case, she should be held blameless, for as Gorgias says, "If speech persuaded and deluded her mind, even against this it is not hard to defend her or free her from blame, as follows. Speech is a powerful master, and achieves the most divine feats with the least evident body." This, to me at least, is an interesting way to think of speech, as something literally physical that can push or pull the mind and body to wherever it likes. Gorgias goes on to compare speech to a type of drug that can cause pleasure or pain in the mind and body, and, he argues, this effect allows a persuasive enough speaker to get people to do things they might not have normally done otherwise. So far this is actually following pretty closely to the Socratic ideas about poetry we discussed last video, namely that poetry is dangerous because it can inflame passions and potentially lead people down the road of irrationality. The difference, though, is that Gorgias doesn't view emotions caused by speech or poetry as irrational. Quite the opposite, in fact. He views them as true, with a capital T. He argues that in persuading Helen, Paris created emotions in her that are true to her, and that these emotions are both natural and justifiable. This is really what the argument comes down to. On the one hand, you have Gorgias and the sophists who argue that humans are able to create truth via expression, whether through rhetoric or poetry or whatever. And on the other hand, you have Plato and Socrates and basically all of Western philosophy up to Nietzsche, arguing that truth is something inherent in the world, whether in forms or inspired by God, and mankind is only able to find this truth through rational questioning and or inward reflection. Now, it's pretty clear which camp won this philosophical smackdown, and today billions of people around the world meditate or pray or simply sit down and think about the meaning of life, searching for a truth with a capital T that they believe is there if only they could access it. But I would argue that we shouldn't dismiss the sophists, nor should we follow the examples of Plato and Aristotle and slander them unfairly. In the centuries that have followed, sophists and sophism have become bywords for a group of people who split hairs over rhetoric in order to make themselves appear smarter than they actually are. And to be fair, we don't know what sophists were actually like in person. Maybe Gorgias was a miserly fart face in real life. But since this video is supposed to be about comparative literature, I think it's worth remembering that a text doesn't mean much on its own. It's just a collection of ink and paper, or ones and zeros for those of you reading ebooks. But by picking that book up and reading it, we as readers create meaning. And we do so without the author's knowledge or consent, and I think that's crucial to be aware of, because how we read books and what kinds of meanings we extract from them both reflects and informs how we see ourselves and the world. And while the knowledge we glean from books may not be universally true or inherent to the world at large, it is certainly true of us individually and of the world that exists in our mind, at least in that moment, and I think that's important. Anyway, thanks for watching, and next week we'll be comparing a few ancient modes of storytelling. Cheers!